And welcome everybody to our weekly interview on Around the Bases with Bubba and Mo. On this week, episode 31, we're going to talk some Diamondbacks as they have been running into October. And in order to do that, we have a beat writer for azcentral.com. You can find him on Twitter at Nick Piecoro. Nick, how we doing today?
Hey, Bubba, what's going on?
Not much. Mo and I are big on this D-backs bandwagon. We've been talking about them quite a bit lately. They're fun to watch. I'm a diehard Giants fan, so anybody that can have a chance to knock the Dodgers out, you're on my board. And I love what you guys are doing. So it's got to be fun in the desert, isn't it?
Yeah, man, it's been an interesting year. They've had a lot go right. A lot of guys kind of stepping up and kind of maturing and maybe entering their primes all at the same time. The rotation has been amazing, really. The lineup has had its cold snaps, like most teams will over the course of a long season. But, they've got 5 guys really in that lineup that you feel pretty good about being up there at any given time. And, it's wound up being a pretty potent lineup at various parts in the season. And I think it's a dangerous team when you get to October.
Definitely. I was telling people a few weeks ago, I would not want to face the D-backs come October. The way their pitching staff's formed, like you said, they have that core offensive part of the lineup that's just deadly. And then you got the role players like a Marte or a Descalso or somebody else that might just show up one day and ruin your night. So very, very interesting stuff. Coming into the season, the expectations were obviously they'd be better than last year, but I don't think many thought they'd make it, this good of a season. How surprised are you, or how surprised are the people around the team that they got this far with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think even the front office is a little surprised. I mean, I think they probably went in like cautiously optimistic, hopeful that things would turn around. I mean, the expectations were so high a year ago, and they kind of crashed and burned and wound up with, people losing their jobs in the organization. So, they always knew the talent was there in terms of I mean, like I said, they went into last year with huge expectations that didn't work out, and the core was basically still the same for this year. But I still think the front office probably went in thinking like, I don't know, maybe a 25% chance things come together, maybe less than that. I think they were ready to kind of start the rebuilding process, maybe starting to, think about spinning certain guys off and ways to improve the farm system. I mean, it's not a great farm system. It's probably gotten a little bit better from where it was at the beginning of the year, but there's still questions about the kind of long-term viability of things around here. But I think once things started to come together, that sort of thinking kind of got put on hold. And, they kind of recognize that you don't get a chance to make a run at the postseason very often. So, they're going to ride it out and see what happens.
Yeah, and it looks like it could potentially be a good ride. Since, they are surprising many, you expect what Goldie's doing to do what he's doing. Greinke's being the ace he needs to be. What would be like the biggest surprise in your mind? Which player or players or group of players really surprised that made this team push the way it did?
I'm like trying to run through the roster real quick in my head. I guess the guy that's probably the biggest surprise for me is Zach Godley.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a guy who for, a long time had always had pretty good stuff, never commanded it super well, always walked more guys than you would have liked, made some mistakes up in the zone, got away with some of them because the stuff is pretty legitimate. But this year it seems like he just commands it a whole lot better. And, he's figured out this breaking ball that, was there at times last year, not to this extent. But he's really figured it out. It's a nasty pitch now. I mean, you look at some of the stats that'll rank like pitch values on Fangraphs, and, you look at breaking balls, and I haven't looked in a little while, but last time I looked, it was like Corey Kluber, Lance McCullers, Zach Godley, which is not what you expect coming into the year. But yeah, it's been a nasty pitch. I guess the rotation as a whole is probably the area that's the biggest surprise. I mean, Godley's there. Robbie Ray has taken a huge step forward. Not that that's totally unexpected, but I don't know that I expected him to be, a top 5 Cy Young candidate all of a sudden. Patrick Corbin has had stretches where he's been basically as good as anybody in the rotation. I think you could even say Zach Greinke has been a bit of a surprise. Coming off the year he came off of, he's finished the year with some mild shoulder issues. He showed up in spring training with his velocity down a couple of ticks, which people completely forget about now. He's probably a top 5 Cy Young guy as well. And this was a guy that entered the year coming off of a really bad season with his velocity down and a year older. So, I think that was all a little bit concerning.
Yeah, that Greinke part's a very, very good point, because in our preseason previews, we were basically giving up on Greinke. The velocity being down scared us tremendously. Yeah. And then you saw him slowly get it going, and he's become that guy. And you could imagine what he's doing. He's trying to be more of like a pitcher, a Maddox type, locate, use what you have and use it to your advantage. And it's worked really well. And then he's got the youngsters, like you mentioned, Ray and Godley and Corbin, who has shown really good stuff at times. Even Taijuan Walker hasn't, when he's healthy, he's been okay. Lots to like there. When you mention all these players, you got to imagine Ray and Greinke for sure. But how do you see the postseason rotation filling out for the D-backs?
Yeah, like you said, Greinke probably starts that wild card game. Robbie Ray, I would imagine, starts the first game of the division series if they get that far, and I guess if he's not needed in the wild card game extensively. But after that, I don't know. Probably if it were me, Godley would go to the bullpen, or Corbin would go to the bullpen. Both of those guys have some experience in relief in recent years. Corbin just last September was going through a rough season in the rotation, got shifted to the bullpen, I want to say in mid-August, and then was lights out as a reliever the rest of the way. So, that he can dominate out of the bullpen potentially. And like I said, Godley has done it a little bit before as well. Taijuan Walker, I think he's maybe made a few relief appearances in his career, but nothing recently. Not to say that, a guy can't just go down there and be fine. I just probably would rather do it with somebody that's done it a little bit more recently. So that's probably what I would do. If it were me, it probably would be Corbin starting game 3. Well, I guess hold on, because you're not going to be able to start Greinke in game 2 right after starting wildcard game 1. So maybe Ray, Corbin, Greinke, Walker, with Godley going to the bullpen.
I like it. And it's a good point you make. You can't just put anybody in the bullpen, because that whole getting loose process is a whole different animal to a lot of these guys. And as you know, since you follow these guys every day, and I played baseball a long time, baseball players are like creatures of habit. And if you start messing with it, it'll destroy it.
I guess the other thing you have to think about too is whether you want back-to-back lefties in that rotation against the Dodgers. I don't know. I could see it working to your advantage. You're kind of being able to neutralize Bellinger and Seager a little bit by having those guys in there. At the same time, you're getting back-to-back starts to some players that are a little bit more platoony on that team. Maybe you'd want them, playing, sitting, and then playing again several days later by splitting those guys up. I don't know. I think it's probably 6 of one, half dozen the other. Yeah,
and you just hit it on the head there. The MLB postseason is one of the biggest games of chess you will ever – like, the stuff these managers do is crazy. I think it's fair to say the D-backs wouldn't be looking at the postseason without Mr. J.D. Martinez, who came over from Detroit. They might be still in the hunt this week, but the position they're in now, I don't think there's a chance without J.D. Martinez. And to be fair, you did send some younger guys over there, but everybody – thought it was a steal. I think it was a steal. He's been out of this world. Did you guys think he'd have this big of an impact? And follow up, is there any chance he resigns since he's going to be taken off after this year?
Well, I mean, I don't know that anybody expected him to. What does he have now? 25 home runs since coming to the Diamondbacks, and something like 50, 54, 55 games, something along those lines. Yeah, probably nobody really expected that. It's pretty crazy. It kind of like you said. I mean, you wonder where they would be without him, if they would be at this point. And then kind of the natural next thought is, well, where are they going to be without him next year if he departs as a free agent? And I don't know, man. I don't know that I can really envision him coming back, kind of given the information that we have. That is like, they have a payroll around $100 million right now, maybe a little north of that. Assuming that they're not going to be able to make some, 15, 20% jump in payroll year to year. They don't really have a ton of guys coming off the books. And in fact, they've got a lot of guys that are going to be getting a little bit more expensive in arbitration. So, barring a jump in payroll, I don't know. It's hard to see him. It's hard to see him coming back. I mean, they've kind of kept it open, at least the possibility with us in their public comments. They're not ruling anything out. I think JD would love to come back, from what I can tell, not just from what he says, but some indications I'm getting from other people that he really likes it here. Now, I don't know what that means when he gets out to the open market and he's got I think he has like a 925 OPS over the past, 4 seasons, like since going to Detroit. He's a 300 hitter. He's got 40-something home runs here for the first time in his career. He only just turned 30, so he's not ancient. He's got some discipline, some plate discipline. And he's not just a pure slugger. He's not, Chris Carter or some of these other guys, Trumbo, that have had some issues finding jobs. So I don't know what that means, whether he wants to come back or not. If he hits the open market and he's got, I don't know where you start in terms of comps. I think probably Yoenis Cespedes 4 and 110. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
But I mean, even that you could argue is light for a guy that hits the way that he does. I mean, it's also a weird time, right? I mean, everybody hits 20 home runs these days. I don't think JD's a very good defender out there. There's some metrics that will say he's the worst defensive outfielder. I haven't seen him that bad. I don't think he's a plus defender though. So teams are valuing things a little bit differently, so it does throw a little bit of a wrinkle into it. I just have a hard time imagining that they'll be able to afford him. Though, I guess one thing I will add, and you mentioned it at the preface of it kind of seemed like they managed to get him without paying a huge price. I think I was looking back at some of the deals that it's taken to land that best slugger on the market in previous trade deadlines, and it was like, Carlos Beltran for Zach Wheeler, or Ben Zobrist for Sean Manaea, or even Cespedes for Michael Fulmer. These are really good prospects that we're moving for these really good sluggers. The Diamondbacks only had to give up Dawel Lugo. So I've been surprised already once with acquiring JD. Maybe they'll surprise me again in being able to keep him.
Yeah, and it seems like, and I'm not even trying to say there's not a chance, but it seems like a long shot, like you said, just for the fact that the open market is going to be a weak year this year, as most guys come out the following year. So JD can charge a premium or ask a premium, and it's going to be tough because, like you also said earlier, is they were almost at the point this year, the Diamondbacks. There were talks everywhere. Let's trade Greinke, let's trade Pollock, let's trade guys and start the rebuild, like you were saying. Let's get at it. So it would be a big surprise, I think, if they did that. But you never know. Winning a championship will bring revenue into your ballpark, so that could be tremendous. He is a really good guy from everything I've seen, and you've been way closer to him than I have. But kind of on the same front, a guy that people would love to see be a Diamondback for life, Paul Goldschmidt, who is perennially one of the best players in baseball, does it all. He's a free agent in 2019 or after 2019. So it's coming up. And if you're going to rebuild, you want to trade him sooner than later and get the most you can. What's the likelihood of a Goldschmidt getting dealt, or are they actually planning on spending the big bucks to keep him as like a Diamondbacks for life?
Yeah, I mean, and that's actually the other factor that's important to keep in mind with bringing back JD Martinez. And not only is Greinke locked up for 34 a year for the next, I guess, 4 after this, which is scary for a guy his age. But yeah, you're going to have to maybe consider extending Paul, at some point. And he already gave them a pretty good discount. I mean, look, at the time he signed that deal, he hadn't really broken out. It looked like a pretty reasonable contract, given the comps at the time. But in retrospect, he's signed to one of the most team-friendly deals in the game. So he's also changed agents to Casey Close over the last couple of years. That happened. I don't think Casey Close has a history of taking below-market deals either. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's an interesting scenario. We'll have to see how it plays out. Again, I mean, it's a player that has a lot of the skill sets that you would think are going to age relatively well. Mm-hmm. But he's going to be 32 at the end of his current contract. How far into your 30s do you want to extend a guy when you're a club with a limited payroll that is going to have to really be careful with how it spends its dollars? And you're already extended out to probably be well beyond your comfort zone with Greinke.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it could make some sense to let Goldschmidt walk, slide Jake Lamb over to first base, and let Brandon Drury play third. But I don't know. I don't know if that's a. I mean, you mentioned consider trading Goldschmidt. I mean, I don't know. It's possible. It also could just make more sense to let it all play out, like kind of have this window to contend. You have it now, and ride it out till it closes.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jake Lamb, and this is a young power bat in the middle of your order. Had a phenomenal first half of the season, and this is the second year in a row where he's kind of fallen off in the second half. Is there something, and maybe you can't say if there is, but is there an injury we don't know about? Is it just he's just kind of lost up there at the moment, or is there something more to it, basically?
I don't know. I mean, it's 2 years in a row, like you said. It's kind of becoming a concern. Is there something about the way he prepares in the off seasons that's leading him to wear down at the end of the year? I don't know. I know Jake Lamb is a guy that thinks a lot. Maybe it's more mental than anything. Maybe he's allowing himself to get caught up in the slump and having trouble digging his way out of it. But I don't know. It's like you said. I mean, it's becoming a concern. He does look lost up there at times. He continues to struggle against left-handed pitching. What's funny, I mean, you step back, it's not a bad season that he's had. It's not like he's been a zero. But I mean, he's hitting something like 150 against left-handed pitching still. He's hitting somewhere around 200 and since the All-Star break. It's been rough. I mean, and it's another guy that's kind of been picked up by JD Martinez, really. I mean, I think that if JD weren't here carrying this huge load that he's carried since the trade, there would be a whole lot more attention on the struggles of Lamb. They just probably wouldn't be as easy to kind of paper over.
Okay. I have to ask this question for my co-host Mo, who's a Boston guy. He is a huge Torii Lovello person, like fan. He loves Torii. He was angry when you guys signed him for the fact he wouldn't be around when Farrell gets fired, according to him. So many things he loves. How big of an impact has Torii had on the entire turnaround of this team?
I don't know. It's always hard to put your finger on a manager's impact. You know, I do think he's kind of come in. He's a pretty good communicator. I think he's just kind of let the guys kind of. I mean, it's a veteran group of players in a lot of ways. There's a lot of guys that came up through the minor leagues together or have been in the big leagues together for a long time. I'm thinking of Goldschmidt and Pollock and Owings and Ahmed and Lamb. You know, I think that those are kind of the guys that are the driving forces in that room, at least among the position players. I think that they kind of steer the ship in their own way, and I think that Torii has been smart enough to kind of let them do that. Say like, hey, look, I'm putting it on you guys to lead the way, to kind of run the show in there. And again, like I said, he's a good communicator. He's just an easygoing guy. He just has a way with people, you know, where it's just like it's just easy for him to just kind of walk up to anybody, have a conversation, get them to open up and get them to trust him. And I think all that stuff is valuable when you're talking about a manager over a 6-month season with a large group of players. I think that stuff is probably more important than the strategy and the in-game management. It's hard to explain if you're not around it on a daily basis, but I mean, I think that stuff ends up being important. I think it kind of keeps everybody kind of grounded and like on an even keel in the room over a long season.
Definitely. And I just got 2 more quick questions and I'll send you on your way. One thing is we heard all about the Humidor all season coming in mid-season. Then they're like, nah, we're going to put it on hold right now. Is this thing just put on hold, like as in we're not going to talk about it anymore? Or is it actually going to start the season next year and, be in play?
Yeah, it's something I've been meaning to revisit. Last they told us, was it May or June when they told us it was canceled for the year. That didn't ever really make sense to me why they were talking about starting
Mid-season.
Implementing it mid-year. It just seemed really weird. I don't understand. Like, I would be upset if I were a club that had come in and, given up 12 runs in 3 days. I'm sorry, 25 runs in 3 days versus a team that came in after and was able to pitch a lot better. So it just didn't make sense to me. It sounded like they were going to, table it until they got to the fall when they could really start to put their focus on tests and implementing it the way that it needs to be implemented. I know that they have a crew from UMass, one of the UMass colleges. That's kind of, I think that's the college, the people that kind of centered the when they did all those studies on the wood bats breaking. That was kind of the group that ran that, and that's the same group that's supposed to come in and make sure the Humidor is up to standards. I think they just realized they were getting to May. They were just running out of time. It was more complicated and more difficult than they realized it was going to be. But yeah, I mean, last I heard they were going to have it ready to go for opening day 2018.
Excellent. And the last question, this could be a quick hitter for you. Which team? Yeah, Rockies, Brewers. Who do you guys want to see in the wild card game?
I don't think they care.
I like that answer.
I mean, obviously they've played all those teams pretty well. I think that when the Diamondbacks faced the Brewers early in the year, I want to say that Ryan Braun maybe played like a few innings and then left again because he had he had just come back from a calf thing that was bothering him early in the year. And I think he re-aggravated it and then was on the DL the rest of that series and when the Brewers wound up coming to Phoenix. So obviously it's a different lineup when he's in it. But I don't think that the Rockies scare them necessarily. I mean, I do think that John Gray is a dangerous option, and I think that you never want to make a mistake to Nolan Arenado. but I think most of the rest of that lineup you can pitch to. And I think most of the rest of the lineup, the Diamondbacks have weapons to Greinke's thrown well against that team. It seems like, you know, Charlie Blackmon got Andrew Chafin as his almost like personal reliever a few straight games. The last time they faced him, didn't have any luck against him. You know, I just feel like they probably match up okay against that team. But I mean, you know, it's a 1-game playoff. I mean, anything can happen.
Yep, and that's the biggest thing. It's a 1-game playoff. Well, Nick, I could ask you a lot about the Diamondbacks. I'm a big fan of what they have going, and I hope you guys have a nice run into October. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and everybody check him out. He's the D-backs beat writer at azcentral.com. He's on Twitter at Nick Piecoro, Piecoro. Nick, again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, man.